This is my baby, and the watch I've kept for the longest time since this obsession began, but at the same time the watch I use the least. Let's rewind. Every proper watch enthusiast has gone through a vintage watch phase. Maybe you stayed there. If so, I respect you a whole lot. The hunt for that proper vintage piece is like an adventure. Indiana Jones of the watch world. If you're a proper enthusiast, you should also own one. Let me tell you why. I'll use my Seamaster as an example of why you should get a vintage watch or take care of the one you've got. But first, I would like to romanticize this a bit. Who bought the 1970 Seamaster first? How has it been travelling for over 50 years, still keeping its time? Maybe it was a gentleman returning from Vietnam, or it played a part in the Cold War, or perhaps it was a gift to a veteran of the Second World War, or was it just a regular family guy, or perhaps it was a woman. Who was the person that first saw this watch in a store window and thought, "This is it, I need this watch, I deserve it"? Why did this person sell it or give it away? How many owners has the watch had? Has it travelled across the great oceans? Anyway, I like to speculate and dream, and so should you. These watches weren't mass produced in the same way watches are these days. The level of technology wasn't even close to what factories practice today. Vintage pieces are pure craftsmanship by people with magic hands, and each watch has its own story, which we'll most likely never know. And you can get an actual Omega at a budget-friendly price. Great history and a great movement. What's not to like? This is an Omega Seamaster reference 168024. It's not a particularly hard watch to find, but there are certain things to research before pulling the trigger on a vintage piece. What is important for you? 1. Is the brand and model significant? 2. Is the production year vital? 3. Is the size important? 4. Is the movement central for your choice? 5. Do you care about maintenance, polishing, replace parts, service, etc.? Taking all these points into account and establishing a decision on all of them might complicate your hunt, but that's the fun part. Pinpointing your exact iteration and then tracking it down. Before we move on, I really appreciate a like and subscribe. It costs you nothing but gives me a lot. I also have a Patreon page which costs you about $4 if you like to support me that way. Thanks for anything. Personally, I wanted an Omega as my vintage cornerstone in the watch box. I was open to both Seamaster and Constellation models. I was in search of a watch to use for formal attire. I used mine during my proposal, for example. I did a lot of research on movements, taking easy notes as Caliber 351 bumper movement, Caliber 551 1959, Kosk no date, Caliber 564 1966, Kosk quick date. The list is long. Finding out stuff like the only thing different between the 564 and the 565 was that the first mentioned had a chronometer certification with furthermore text to show to on the dial. Interesting how you can receive a Kosk certification before 1973 when the organisation was founded. One step ahead once more Omega. In today's day and age, people sadly tend to prefer larger watches, and don't misunderstand me, I speak not about the watch enthusiasts, but people in general. If you appreciate the historical significance with watchmaking and horology, you should opt for smaller watches, at least add a few to your collection. That was what they struggled to accomplish back then. A small, practical timepiece to give you the time straight off your wrist when in action. Most vintage pieces, especially Omega, are 34mm across. I'll put the exact numbers of my 168024 on screen. But if you add jumbo or oversized to your search, you find bigger versions which might fit better for you. They might be around 38mm. For me, 34mm sits well on my 16.5cm wrist and for formal use. Hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe and check my Patreon support. Thanks. Catch you in the next one, watchfam.